At my mother's funeral, they refused to let me in, but they froze when my dead billionaire grandmother showed up out of nowhere to stop the funeral and expose their lies with undeniable evidence that would destroy them forever. My name is Kinsley Roberts, and at 38 years old, I have spent the last 15 years of my life dissecting the anatomy of lies. I work as a senior forensic auditor for Harborgate Forensics in Richmond, Virginia. My job is not merely about mathematics, it is about human behavior. I look for the hesitation in a signature, the ghost data in a deleted file, and the silence where a number should speak. I track the invisible bleed of money that people think they have scrubbed clean. When a CEO embezzles millions, I am the one who finds the $3 coffee charge that brings the whole house of cards down. I am professional. I am clinical. I am used to being the smartest person in the room. But standing on the tarmac at the Richmond airport, clutching a garment bag that contained a black dress I had bought 20 minutes prior, I felt like a child who had lost her way in the dark. The call had come from a hospital administrator, not my family. Denise Marlowe, my mother, was dead. Sudden cardiac arrest. They said it was a phrase that felt too small, too sterile to contain the magnitude of the loss. I had not spoken to my mother in 6 months. It was not a fight, exactly. It was a drifting, a silence that had grown heavy and calcified until neither of us knew how to break it. I had buried myself in casework at Harborgate, telling myself that next week I would drive over, next week I would call. Now there were no more weeks. The magnitude of my guilt was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I drove to the chapel in a rental car that smelled of stale cigarettes and pine air freshener. The steering wheel felt foreign in my hands. I had changed into my funeral clothes in the airport bathroom, and the fabric was stiff, the creases from the store still sharp against my skin. I felt like an imposter in my own grief. The chapel was an imposing structure of gray stone and stained glass, looming against a sky that threatened rain. It was the kind of ostentatious place Graham Kessler would choose. Graham was my mother's second husband, a man who wore expensive suits that never quite fit his posture, as if he were constantly shrinking away from his own reflection. He had 2 children from his previous marriage, Belle and Trent, who were polished and sharp-edged, always looking at me as if I were a smudge on a wine glass. I parked the car and walked toward the heavy oak doors. I was clutching a wreath made of white lilies. My chest was tight, a physical pressure that made it hard to draw a full breath. I just wanted to see her. I needed to see her face one last time to make it real, to close the loop of guilt that was tightening around my throat. I reached for the handle of the chapel door, but it did not turn. Instead, it swung open from the inside, and Graham Kessler stepped out, blocking the threshold. He was flanked by Belle and Trent, forming a wall of expensive black wool and palpable hostility. Graham looked at me, his eyes dry and hard. He did not look like a grieving widower. He looked like a bouncer at a club where I was not on the list. "Kinsley," he said, his voice flat. "You should not be here." I blinked, the words taking a moment to process through the fog in my brain. "What are you talking about, Graham? She is my mother." "Move out of the way." "She was your mother," Belle corrected, her voice dripping with a fox sympathy that was more insulting than a slap. She smoothed the lapel of her blazer. "But you lost the right to that title months ago. You abandoned her." "I did not abandon her," I said, my voice rising, the heat climbing up my neck. "We were busy. Life happens. I am here now. Let me in." Graham took a step forward, invading my personal space. He smelled of scotch and peppermint, a combination that made my stomach turn. "Denise gave specific instructions, Kinsley. She was heartbroken by your silence. She told us quite clearly that if anything happened to her, she did not want you parading your guilt at her funeral. You are not on the family list. You are not welcome." My mind reeled. That sounded nothing like my mother. Denise was soft, sometimes to a fault. She was a woman who forgave slights before they were even fully committed. She would never ban her only daughter from her funeral. It was illogical. It was a deviation from the baseline behavior I had known for 38 years. "You are lying," I said, my voice trembling, not with sadness but with the cold vibration of rage. "Mom would never say that. Show me the will. Show me her written instructions." "Kinsley," Trent sneered from behind his father. "It is a funeral. Have some respect and leave." I am not leaving until I see her, I said, planting my feet. Graham sighed, a theatrical exhale of a man burdened by an unruly child. He lifted his hand and signaled to two large men in tactical-looking security uniforms standing in the shadows of the portico. Escort Miss Roberts to her vehicle, Graham ordered. Ensure she leaves the premises. As the guards moved toward me, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a reflex to check it, a habit drilled into me by years of high-stakes auditing. I pulled it out, stepping back to avoid the reaching hand of the first guard. It was a calendar notification, but not mine. Months ago, I had synced my mother's calendar to mine because she kept forgetting her cardiology appointments. I had never unsynced it. The notification on my screen read, Wells Fargo, 10:30 in the morning. I stared at the screen. Today was Tuesday. The appointment was for today. My mind, trained to spot anomalies, instantly overlaid this data point with the digital obituary Graham had posted online. The notice stated that Denise Marlowe had passed away peacefully in her sleep at 9 o'clock in the morning yesterday. But as I looked at the calendar, I remembered something else. I swiped open my banking app. I was a co-signer on one of her old emergency accounts. I scrolled back. There was a pending transaction, a notary fee, dated yesterday, timestamped 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My heart stopped. Dead women do not notarize documents. The discrepancy hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not just a family squabble. This was fraud. This was a cover-up. The accountant in me woke up cold and sharp, pushing the grieving daughter aside. Wait, I said, looking up at Graham. The tears were gone from my eyes. Why did Mom have a notary transaction yesterday afternoon, 7 hours after you said she died? Graham's face went pale. It was a subtle shift, a tightening of the muscles around his mouth, a flicker in his eyes. You are hysterical, Graham hissed. Get her out of here now. The guards grabbed my arms, their grip bruising and painful. I struggled, digging my heels into the concrete. Let go of me! You are hiding something, Graham. Why are you burying her so fast? Why is the timeline wrong? Drag her? Graham spat, losing his composure. Throw her in the street if you have to. I was being hauled backward, my heels scraping against the stone. The heavy oak doors of the chapel began to close, sealing the secrets inside. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound of frustration and despair. The heavy doors slammed shut with a final booming thud, sealing the silence in my mother's casket inside. I was alone with the two security guards, who were dragging me backward across the wet stone. My heels scraped the concrete, the friction a raw, grinding sound in the sudden quiet. Profound silence. I gasped, trying to catch my breath. Let me go. I can walk. They ignored me, their grip unyielding. We were halfway to the parking lot when the sound cut through the humid Virginia air. It was the screech of tires, not just one car, but a convoy. A fleet of 4 black sedans, polished to a mirror shine, tore into the church driveway. They moved with aggressive, synchronized precision, swerving around the stately black hearse and coming to a halt directly in front of the chapel entrance, blocking the path entirely. The sound of the doors opening was synchronized, a series of sharp metallic clicks like the loading of a weapon or the strike of a judge's gavel. The guards holding me froze. Their grip loosened just enough for me to wrench my arms free. We all turned to look. From the lead car, a driver in a dark suit stepped out and opened the rear passenger door. He did not look like a chauffeur. He looked like paramilitary. A leg emerged, clad in a black heel, sharp and terrifyingly high. Then the rest of her followed. The woman was tall, her posture erect and unyielding as a steel beam. She wore a black morning suit that looked like it cost more than the chapel itself. Her hair was silver, cut in a sharp bob that framed a face made of angles and ice. She wore dark sunglasses, but even without seeing her eyes, I felt the weight of her gaze. The air in the parking lot seemed to drop 10 degrees. I stopped breathing. I knew that face. I had seen that face in newspapers, in magazines, and in the nightmares of my childhood. I had seen that face on the front page of the Wall Street Journal 5 years ago under the headline, Billionaire matriarch Evelyn H. Halstead perishes in helicopter crash off the Amalfi Coast. Evelyn Halstead, my grandmother. The woman who had disowned my mother 20 years ago for marrying a mechanic. The woman who was supposed to be dead. She stood there, adjusting her leather gloves. Alive, very, very alive. Graham and his children had burst out of the chapel doors, alerted by the noise. They stopped dead on the steps. Graham looked as if he had seen a ghost. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Evelyn did not look at me. She did not look at the guards. She walked straight toward the chapel doors, her heels clicking on the pavement with a rhythmic, terrifying cadence. Graham found his voice, though it was a strangled squeak. "Evelyn, that is impossible!" "We buried you." Evelyn stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She slowly removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were the same color as mine, a piercing storm cloud gray, but hers held a power I had never possessed. "You buried an empty casket, Graham," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried across the lot like a crack of thunder. It was a voice used to commanding boardrooms and dismantling companies. "And now you are trying to bury my daughter before the ink is dry." She turned her head slightly, acknowledging me for the first time. It was a brief, assessing glance devoid of warmth, but full of recognition. Then she looked back at Graham. "Get out of my way," Evelyn commanded. "You have no authority here." Graham stammered, though he was stepping back, his body betraying his cowardice. "This is a private funeral. Denise is gone." Evelyn ascended the stairs. The guards who had been manhandling me moments ago stepped aside, heads bowed, instinctively recognizing the presence of a predator far higher on the food chain. She stopped inches from Graham's face. "I am the authority," she said perfectly clearly. "And I am telling you this only once. Do not bury my daughter yet. I have not signed for her death." She pushed past him, the physical contact shocking the crowd into silence. She walked through the open doors of the chapel, into the gloom where my mother lay. I stood in the parking lot, my wrist still throbbing where the guards had held me. My world had just tilted on its axis. The mother I loved was dead, the grandmother I feared was alive, and the stepfather I despised was shaking in his expensive shoes. I looked at the phone in my hand, at the notification of the notary appointment. The numbers, the discrepancies. Evelyn H. Halstead had just bought me time. I did not know how, and I did not know why, but she had kicked the door open. Now it was my turn to walk through it. I straightened my jacket, took a deep breath of the humid air, and followed the dead woman into the church. The silence inside the chapel was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb that had landed but failed to detonate. I followed Evelyn Halstead down the center aisle, the sound of her heels striking the marble floor echoing like gunshots in a canyon. The mourners looked as though they were witnessing a resurrection, or perhaps an execution. Evelyn walked with a singular, predatory focus toward the mahogany casket resting on the dais. The funeral director, Mr. Abernathy, stepped forward trembling, trying to block Evelyn's path. "Madame," he stammered, "we are in the middle of a service. You cannot simply—" Evelyn turned her head slowly. "Halt the proceedings. Mr. Abernathy, do not seal this casket. Do not transport it to the crematorium." Graham Kessler scrambled up the steps, his face a mottled map of red rage and white panic. "This is a farce," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Evelyn. "This woman is an imposter, a lunatic! Security! Get her out!" "Sanctity?" Evelyn repeated the word as if tasting something rotten. She faced the congregation, her voice projecting effortlessly. "Graham speaks of sanctity while he rushes a cremation. Tell me, Graham, since when does the Kessler family rush anything that does not involve a payout?" Evelyn produced a sleek gold card from her clutch. "Mr. Kessler might have the marriage certificate, but I have the mortgage. The Sapphire Trust, which I control, owns the land this chapel sits on. If you move that body 1 inch closer to a furnace before I give the order, I will foreclose on this building by noon tomorrow and turn it into a parking garage." The threat hung in the air, absolute and credible. Mr. Abernathy swallowed hard, looking from Graham to Evelyn. The calculus of survival was simple. "We will pause the service," he announced, his voice weak. "Please, everyone, clear the room." Evelyn did not wait. She turned to me, her gray eyes locking onto mine. For the first time, I saw urgency there. "Kinsley," she said. It was not a greeting, it was a summons. "With me, now." She marched toward the vestry, a private room to the left of the altar. I followed her, my legs feeling like lead. She slammed the heavy door behind us, turning the lock with a definitive click. "Grandmother," I said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. You are supposed to be at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, and you are supposed to be a forensic auditor." She snapped, the steel returning instantly. "So stop staring at me like I am a ghost and start thinking like a professional." "It was necessary," she explained, glancing out the blinds. "A hostile faction within the consortium. I am talking about men who solve board disputes with car bombs. The only way to save the legacy and ensure your mother's safety was to remove the target. Dying on paper was the most efficient strategic move. You left us," I said, anger flaring up to replace the shock. "You let Mom believe she was an orphan. I protected her. If they knew I was in contact, she would have been leverage. Isolation was her shield." She walked over and tossed a thick manila envelope onto the coffee table. "Sit down. This is a copy of a blind trust I established 10 years ago. It effectively freezes the liquidity of the estate the moment her heart stopped beating. Graham does not know it exists." "You came back because of the money," I said. "I came back because Denise called me," Evelyn said softly. The change in her voice was devastating. 3 weeks ago. She sounded terrified. She did not give me details. She just said one thing to me. Evelyn leaned in, her eyes boring into mine. She said, "Mother, if anything happens to me, do not let them bury me too fast. Promise me you will stop the clock." A chill went down my spine. "She knew," I whispered. "She suspected," Evelyn corrected. "And now she is dead, and her husband is trying to cremate her within 36 hours of her death, bypassing a full autopsy. You are standing in a funeral home, Kinsley," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "But do not be confused. You are not at a funeral. You are standing in the middle of an illicit asset transfer. They are not trying to say goodbye to her. They are trying to dispose of the evidence so they can unlock the vault." She turned and pulled out a single sheet of paper from the envelope. "I have my own resources. When Denise died, my system flagged her accounts. We pulled the surveillance footage from the bank branch where that transaction you saw took place yesterday." She slid the photo across the table. It was a grainy black and white still. It showed a woman wearing my mother's coat and sunglasses, poised over a document with a pen. "That is Mom," I said, squinting. "Look at the person standing behind her," Evelyn instructed. I shifted my gaze. Standing just behind the woman's chair, hand resting possessively on the back of the seat, was a figure in a hoodie pulled low. The build was wrong for Graham. It was too slender. And on the wrist, clearly visible, was a distinct chunky silver bracelet. "That is not Graham," I gasped. "No," Evelyn said grimly. "It is not. Either the death certificate is a lie, or that is not your mother in the chair. Or worse, your mother was alive yesterday afternoon, forced to sign that document, and then killed immediately after. Graham is involved. He has to be. He is the beneficiary," Evelyn said. "But he is not smart enough to do this alone. He has a partner. I have stopped the cremation for now, but my legal hold is tenuous. We have 48 hours, maybe less. I handle the legal war. You." She grabbed my shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. "Are going to find out what really happened. You are going to find the lawyer Denise was using, the one she hired in secret. Caleb Rohr. His office is downtown. If Denise left a breadcrumb trail, it starts on his desk. Go to him now." "What about you?" I asked, standing up. "I am going to stand guard over that body," Evelyn said, her voice turning to ice. "I am going to sit in this chapel, and I am going to dare anyone to come through those doors with a match." "Go and Kinsley." I turned back. "Do not trust anyone, not even the people you think are on our side." I nodded, clutching my purse. I walked out of the vestry, past the shocked faces of the mourners, past Graham, who was screaming into a cell phone, and out into the humid Virginia air. The address Evelyn H. Halstead had memorized and whispered to me belonged to a building in the financial district of Richmond, but not the part where the glass skyscrapers scratched the clouds. Caleb Rohr's office was located in a squat brick structure sandwiched between a parking garage and a derelict printing shop. It was the kind of building that housed bail bondsmen and private investigators, people who made their living in the gray margins of the law. I checked the rearview mirror for the 4th time since leaving the chapel. The rain had started to fall, a steady gray drizzle that slicked the streets and blurred the windshield. I did not see the black sedan that had been parked 2 rows over at the funeral home, but the sensation of being watched was a cold prickle at the base of my neck. It was a feeling I knew well from my days auditing cartels. The primitive instinct that tells a gazelle the grass is moving against the wind. I parked my rental car a block away and walked, keeping my head down against the rain. The lobby of the building smelled of lemon polish and old carpet. The directory listed Roar Associates on the 3rd floor. I took the stairs, avoiding the elevator that looked like it had not been inspected since the 1990s. When I reached Suite 304, the door was locked. There was no receptionist, just a frosted glass pane with the name stenciled in peeling black letters. I knocked. A sharp, authoritative rap. Silence. I knocked again, harder. "Mr. Roar, my name is Kinsley Roberts. Evelyn sent me." I heard the sound of a deadbolt sliding back, then a chain rattling. The door opened a crack, revealing a slice of a face pale with anxiety. Caleb Roar was a man in his late 50s with thinning hair that looked like it had been pulled by nervous hands. He wore a white dress shirt that was wrinkled at the elbows and a tie that had been loosened hours ago. "Come in," he hissed, glancing past me into the empty hallway. Quickly, I stepped inside and he immediately slammed the door, engaging 3 separate locks. He rushed to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds before yanking the cords to shut them tight. The office was dimly lit, illuminated only by a green banker's lamp on a desk buried under stacks of paper. It smelled of stale coffee and fear. "You should not have come here," Caleb said, turning to face me. He was wiping his hands on a handkerchief. "It is not safe." "My mother is dead, Mr. Roar," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. "Safety is no longer my priority. Evelyn told me you have answers." "Evelyn," he breathed, sinking into his leather chair. The springs groaned under his weight. "I thought she was a ghost. When she called me this morning, I nearly had a heart attack. Your mother told me Evelyn was alive, but hearing that voice—" "Focus," I said, stepping closer to the desk. "My mother hired you. Why? Graham has a team of corporate lawyers at the firm. Why did she need you?" Caleb looked at the file cabinets lining the wall, metal coffins holding the secrets of the dead. "Because she knew she couldn't trust the firm. She knew Graham was compromised. She came to me 6 months ago. She wanted to draft a codicil to her will, a document that would supersede everything Graham had forced her to sign." He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder, his hands trembling slightly. "Your mother was terrified, Kinsley. She was not the woman you remember. She was paranoid. She made me install an encrypted server. She made me buy burner phones. She told me that if she died under any circumstances that were not clearly natural, and I mean clearly like a lightning strike in a public park, I was to immediately file a motion for an independent autopsy. She expected to be killed. She expected an accident," Caleb corrected. "She told me specifically, if I fall down the stairs, Caleb, do not believe it. If my heart stops, do not believe it." She knew they would make it look medical. I leaned against the edge of his desk. "The autopsy is already being blocked. Evelyn stopped the cremation, but Graham is fighting it. We need evidence to convince a judge to keep that body on ice." "I have something better than evidence of murder," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I have the motive." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver object. It was a USB drive worn at the edges. He held it up but did not hand it over. Dennis was not just a victim. She was a fighter. She started paying attention to the papers Graham brought home. She started photographing documents when he was in the shower. She compiled a dossier. "What is on the drive?" I asked, eyeing the silver stick. "A ledger," Caleb said. "A shadow ledger. Graham and his partners have built a network of shell companies. They are funneling money out of the family trust, washing it through construction projects that never break ground and consulting firms that have no employees. But there is a pattern. All the money eventually flows into one entity." "Blue Hollow Freight," I said, remembering the name I had seen on a stray invoice in my mother's email months ago, a detail I had dismissed at the time. Caleb's eyes widened. "You know it." "I am a forensic auditor," I said. "I see patterns, but I need the proof." "Give me the drive, Caleb?" He hesitated. "There is a second file on here. It is not financial. It is audio. Denise recorded a conversation between Graham and a man named Miles. I have not listened to the whole thing, but it is damning. It connects them to a larger syndicate. If this gets out, people go to prison for 20 years or they get killed. Give it to me, I repeated, extending my hand. Just as his hand moved toward mine, a sound shattered the quiet of the room. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was his cell phone sitting on the desk. The screen lit up, casting a harsh blue glow on his sweating face. Caleb looked down at the caller ID. The color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a corpse himself. He did not answer it. He simply reached out with a shaking finger and silenced the ringer, staring at the phone as if it were a bomb counting down. "Who is it?" I asked. "We are done," Caleb said abruptly. He shoved the USB drive back into his pocket. "You need to leave right now. You were never here. You can't just send me away," I argued. "If they know I am here, I am already a target. The drive is safer with me. They don't know you are here," he whispered, his eyes darting to the door. "But they know I am here, and they just signaled that my time is up. Go out the back, take the fire escape." He grabbed my arm and practically dragged me toward a side door that was hidden behind a coat rack. "Wet," I said, resisting. "What about the autopsy motion?" "I will file it electronically," he shouted, panic making his voice shrill. "Just get out. If you want to help your mother, stay alive." He shoved me through the door and slammed it shut. I heard the lock click. I was standing in a narrow, dimly lit service corridor that smelled of garbage and damp concrete. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I had the information, the shadow ledger, the recording, the name Blue Hollow Freight, but I was empty-handed. I walked down the corridor, deciding against the fire escape. I pressed the button for the service elevator. When the doors opened on the lobby level, I stepped out, intending to turn toward the service exit, but I stopped dead. Standing in the main hallway, directly in my path, was a woman. She was examining a piece of abstract art on the wall with the bored detachment of a critic at a gallery opening. It was Belle Kessler. She had changed out of her funeral attire into a cream-colored power suit that looked like it cost more than Caleb Rohr's entire annual salary. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail, and she was holding a leather portfolio. She turned slowly as I stepped out of the elevator. She did not look surprised. Her eyes, cool and predatory, swept over me from head to toe. "Kinsley," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I didn't peg you for the type to visit a dump like this." I stood my ground. "I could say the same for you, Belle. Graham usually keeps you in the penthouse. Daddy has his errands. I have mine," she said, taking a step toward me. "I was just stopping by to drop off a settlement offer for Mr. Rohr. We like to be proactive." "Proactive or intimidation?" I asked. Belle laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You are so dramatic, just like your mother, always seeing monsters in the shadows. Here is a truth for you, stepsister. You are playing a game you do not understand. You are just a nuisance, and nuisances get removed." She looked pointedly at the elevator I had just exited. "Did you get what you came for? A drop of tear from the lawyer, or a signature?" "I got enough," I lied. "We will see," Belle said. She stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. "Run along, Kinsley. Go back to your spreadsheets. Leave the real business to the adults." I walked past her, every instinct screaming at me not to turn my back. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the lobby and out into the rain. I did not look back until I was in my car, doors locked, engine roaring to life. As I drove away, I saw a black sport utility vehicle idling across the street. The windows were tinted, but I knew who was inside. I drove aimlessly for an hour, making random turns to ensure I was not being followed, before checking into a motel on the outskirts of the city. It was a nondescript place, the kind where people paid cash and did not ask questions. Night fell, heavy and suffocating. At 11 o'clock, I turned on the local news. The reporter was standing in the rain, illuminated by the flashing red and blue lights of fire trucks. Behind her, smoke billowed from a brick building. Flames were licking out of the third-floor windows. "Firefighters are battling at 2. Alarm blaze at a commercial building on 4th Street, the reporter said, shouting over the roar of the water hoses. "The fire appears to have started in a law office on the 3rd floor. Authorities are saying early indications point to a massive electrical failure." I stared at the screen, my hand covering my mouth. It was Caleb's building. It was Caleb's office. Electrical failure. I whispered to the empty motel room. It was not an electrical failure. I had seen those file cabinets. I had seen the stacks of paper. It was a bonfire. They had not just burned the office. They had burned the paper trail. Every deposition, every affidavit, every note my mother had written to Caleb. It was all ash now. And Caleb. I remembered the fear in his eyes, the phone call. They knew he was there. They knew I was there. They waited for me to leave, and then they struck. Bell had been the gatekeeper, ensuring the timeline was respected. They thought they had won. They thought that by burning the paper they had erased the problem. But they had made a mistake. Caleb had not given me the drive, but he had told me what was on it. He had given me the name Blue Hollow Freight, and more importantly, arson is not a corporate strategy. It is a felony. They had escalated the war. They had moved from fraud to violence. I stood up and walked to the window. The reflection in the glass looked tired, pale, and terrified. But behind the fear, the forensic auditor was taking notes. Fire destroys paper. It melts plastic, but it leaves traces. And if they thought they could burn the truth out of existence, they had never met a woman who could reconstruct a crime scene from a pile of ash. I picked up my phone. I needed to call Evelyn. The paper trail was gone, but the war had just begun. The fluorescent lights of Harborgate Forensics hummed with a frequency that usually soothed me. It was a white noise that drowned out the chaotic variables of the real world, replacing them with the binary certainty of ones and zeros. I walked into the open, plan office at 8 o'clock in the morning, holding a cup of black coffee that I did not intend to drink. I was wearing my work armor, a charcoal suit, a silk blouse, and a face that revealed absolutely nothing. To my colleagues, I was just Kinsley Roberts, returning from bereavement leave earlier than expected. To the receptionist, I was the dedicated workaholic who used spreadsheets to cope with grief. They offered me sad smiles and murmured condolences about my mother, which I accepted with a stiff nod. They did not know that 24 hours ago, I had watched a lawyer's office burn to the ground. They did not know that the woman who raised me might have been murdered. My job was no longer to audit distant corporate accounts. It was to perform a forensic autopsy on my own life. I sat at my desk and logged into the terminal. The dual monitors flickered to life. I felt a strange sense of dissociation, as if my hands belonged to a pianist preparing to play a concerto while the concert hall was on fire. I was here because Harborgate had access to databases that the average citizen did not. We subscribed to global corporate registries, asset tracking software, and deep web scraping tools that could find a heartbeat in a stone. I started with Blue Hollow Freight, Limited Liability Company. Caleb Rohr had given me the name before the fire took him. I typed the name into the corporate registry search bar. The results were underwhelming, which was exactly what I expected. Blue Hollow was registered in Delaware, a state famous for its corporate opacity. The registered agent was a generic filing service that handled thousands of companies. The address listed for its headquarters was a mail drop in an industrial park outside of Baltimore. I pulled the filing history. The company was formed 9 months ago. The timeline made the hair on my arm stand up. 9 months ago was when my mother had first mentioned feeling tired and foggy during our rare phone calls. It was when Graham had started taking over the household finances, claiming he wanted to alleviate her stress. I cross-referenced Blue Hollow with the banking data I had managed to scrape from my mother's shared account before Graham locked me out. It was a small window of visibility, but it was enough. I found a transaction, not to Blue Hollow directly, but to a company called Apex Consulting, $5,000, paid for advisory services. I ran Apex Consulting. It was a shell, no website, no employees on LinkedIn. Its address was a suite in a strip mall in Nevada. I looked at the Apex Consulting outflow. They were sending monthly payments to another entity called Meridian Logistics. I traced Meridian, and there it was. Meridian sent 80% of its incoming capital directly to Blue Hollow Freight. It was a classic layering scheme. The money moved through 3 distinct layers of accounts to scrub its origin. It was designed to look like legitimate business commerce. Consulting fees, logistics retainers, supply chain management costs, but it was just water flowing through a series of pipes all emptying into the same reservoir. I looked at the amounts. They were specific: $9,500, $9,800, always just under the $10,000 reporting threshold that would trigger an automatic flag to federal regulators. This was called structuring or smurfing in the trade. It was the hallmark of someone who knew the law just well enough to skirt the edges of it. Graham was a businessman, but he was not this sophisticated. This required an architect. A secure chat window popped up on my secondary monitor. It was an encrypted messaging app that had installed itself on my system 10 minutes after I arrived. User, Ghost Protocol initiated. Message, the network is secure. Evelyn sends her regards. I am your extraction team for data. Call me Cypher. I didn't type back immediately. Evelyn had promised me resources, but seeing them manifest on my work computer was jarring. It meant they had bypassed Harborgate's firewalls, which were supposed to be impenetrable. Kinsley, I am looking at Blue Hollow. Cypher messaged. We know. We are already inside their server. It is empty. It is a ghost ship. But we found a link to a physical address for the server host. It is in the same building as Graham's private equity firm. My breath hitched. They were not even trying to hide it. Well, they were just hiding it behind enough paper that no one would look. Cypher. We also recovered the cloud backup of Denise Marlowe's phone. Graham wiped the physical device an hour after the time of death, but he missed the cloud sync window. Kinsley. Send it. A folder appeared on my desktop. I opened it. It was a digital graveyard. I scrolled through the logs of my mother's phone. The first thing I noticed was the selective deletion. The photo gallery was gone. Every picture of me, every picture of my grandmother, every memory of her life before Graham, deleted. It was an act of emotional violence, an attempt to rewrite her history to make it look like she had no one but him. But the banking apps were untouched. Her email was intact. Why wipe the photos but keep the financial tools? Because they needed her to be alive digitally. They needed to access her accounts, approve transfers, and respond to authentication requests. They did not kill Denise Marlowe, the person. They killed Denise Marlowe, the obstacle. They kept Denise Marlowe, the signator, alive. I opened the health data folder. My mother wore a smartwatch. She tracked her steps, her sleep, and her heart rate. I found the data for the day she died. The official story, the one Graham had told the police, was that she had fallen down the stairs at 9 o'clock in the morning. The trauma caused her heart to stop. I looked at the heart rate graph. At 8:30 in the morning, her heart rate spiked. It went from a resting 70 beats per minute to 150. That was panic or exertion. Then at 8:45, it became erratic. The graph looked like a seismograph during an earthquake. Premature ventricular contractions, arrhythmia. This was consistent with a heart attack or a drug interaction. But here was the smoking gun. The accelerometer on her watch, the sensor that detects movement and falls, did not register a significant impact until 9:15. She was in cardiac distress for 30 minutes before she fell. The fall didn't cause the heart attack. The heart attack happened, and then 30 minutes later, her body was thrown down the stairs. I stared at the screen, tears blurring the sharp lines of the graph. I could see it. I could see her clutching her chest, unable to breathe, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. I could see Graham watching her, checking his watch, waiting for the right moment to stage the accident. You monsters, I whispered. The secure chat blinked again. Cypher, you have a tail. We detected a localized signal tracker on your vehicle. It was planted while you were inside the funeral home. I froze. Kinsley who? Cypher gray sport utility vehicle. Ford Explorer, Virginia plates. It is registered to a rental company used by Graham's firm for consultants. Leave the office. Do not go to your motel. Go to the safe house at the coordinates I am sending. Take the service exit. I grabbed my bag. I pulled the hard drive from my tower, a breach of protocol that would get me fired if I survived this, and shoved it into my purse. I walked out of the office, moving with a fast, clipped pace, leaving already Kinsley. My manager called out from his office. Family emergency, I said, not slowing down. I took the stairs down 12 flights. I exited through the loading dock, stepping out into the bright, blinding sunlight of noon. My rental car was parked in the garage, but I knew I could not use it. I hailed a cab. Union Station. I told the driver. As we pulled away, I watched the rearview mirror. A gray sport utility vehicle pulled out of the parking structure 3 cars behind us. Change of plans, I told the driver. Take a left here, then another left, then a right. The driver grumbled but complied. We made the first left. The gray sport utility vehicle followed. We made the second left. It followed. We made the right, cutting through a residential neighborhood that was nowhere near the train station. The gray sport utility vehicle was still there, maintaining a steady 2-car distance. It is a primal feeling, being hunted. It strips away the veneer of civilization. The leather seats of the taxi felt like a cage. My heart hammered against my ribs, matching the erratic rhythm I had just seen on my mother's health graph. Stop here, I said suddenly, throwing a $20 bill at the driver as we passed a busy shopping mall. I jumped out before the car had fully stopped and sprinted into the crowd of shoppers. I wove through the aisles of a department store, exiting through the cosmetics department on the other side. A black sedan was waiting at the curb. The rear door opened. "Get in," a voice said from the darkness of the back seat. I dove in. The car sped off before I had even closed the door. Evelyn H. Halstead was sitting next to me. She was wearing a different wig today, a short brunette bob and oversized sunglasses. She looked like any other wealthy woman on her way to a lunch date. "You are shaking," she observed, not looking up from her tablet. "They are following me," I gasped. "Graham knows I am digging. I found the money trail, Blue Hollow Freight, and I found the medical data." Her heart went haywire 30 minutes before they staged the fall. Evelyn finally looked at me. Her expression was terrifying. It was a cold, hard rage that burned without a flame. "I know," she said softly. "Seifer sent me the data." "Why have to go to the police?" I said. "The police will take weeks to subpoena the records," Evelyn said. "By the time they get to the truth, the money will be in the Cayman Islands and the body will be ash." "So what do we do?" I asked. "I am an auditor, not a vigilante." "You are both now?" Evelyn said. She reached over and took my hand. "You are thinking like a victim, Kinsley. You are thinking that if you show them enough pain, they will stop. They will not. They are not afraid of your tears. They are afraid of your reading. You are not the prey anymore. You are the hunter." She handed me a new phone. "Graham has called for a family meeting tonight. He thinks he can buy you off. You will go. You will sit in that house and you will look him in the eye while you record every word he says, because tonight, the dead are coming to dinner." The lawyer Graham sent to my motel room looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in arrogance and expensive cologne. His name was Sterling Vance, a senior partner at the firm that handled the Kessler family trust. He sat on the edge of the cheap motel chair, trying very hard not to let his cashmere coat touch the polyester bedspread. He slid a document across the scarred laminate table. It was thick, bound in blue paper, and smelled of laser toner. "Mr. Kessler wishes to be generous," Vance said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that delivered bad news as if it were a favor. "He understands that you are grieving. He also understands that your financial situation is modest compared to the estate. He is prepared to offer you a one-time settlement of $200,000. I looked at the number. $200,000. It was enough to pay off my mortgage. It was enough to take a year off work. "And in exchange?" I asked, not touching the paper. "In exchange, you will sign this waiver," Vance said, tapping the document with a manicured finger. "It is a standard quitclaim of interest. It states that due to your prolonged estrangement from your mother, you acknowledge that you have no standing to contest the will, the trust, or the funeral arrangements." "Arrangement." I repeated the word. It tasted like copper in my mouth. "Is that the narrative now?" "It is the reality, Miss Roberts," Vance said, his smile tight and pitying. "You have not visited the family home in 6 months. You were not present for holidays. The courts look at presence, not sentiment. Graham was there. You were not. This document simply formalizes what is already true." I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes. They were weaponizing my guilt. They were taking the distance I had kept to protect my own sanity and turning it into legal evidence of abandonment. "I was not estranged," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I was pushed away by Graham, and now I know why." "I would be careful," Vance warned, his tone hardening. Accusations require proof. Libel suits are expensive. If you do not sign this, Graham will petition the court to have you declared a hostile party. He will freeze you out completely. You will walk away with zero instead of $200,000. I picked up the document. I felt the weight of it. Then I looked Vance in the eye. You can tell Graham that I do not want his money, I said. And you can tell him that estrangement works both ways. I was not there to see him pretend to love her, but I am here now to watch him go to prison. Vance stood up, snatching the papers back. You are making a mistake, Miss Roberts. A very expensive mistake. He left, the door clicking shut behind him. 10 minutes later, my phone began to buzz. It was not Graham. It was my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who lived in Oregon. We spoke perhaps twice a year. Kinsley. Her voice was shrill. I just got off the phone with Belle. Oh, honey, is it true? Is what true, Aunt Linda? I asked, walking over to the window to peer through the blinds. She said you had a breakdown at the funeral home. Linda said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She said you were screaming at the guards, hallucinating that Mom was still alive. She said you are unstable, that the grief triggered something. I closed my eyes. Belle, of course. Belle was lying. Belle is lying, I said. She sounded very concerned. Linda pressed. She said you were making up conspiracy theories about bank accounts. Kinsley, honey, if you need help, there is no shame in it. But please don't ruin the funeral. Let Graham grieve. He is devastated. He is not devastated, Linda. I snapped, losing my patience. He is a thief and Belle is covering for him. See, Linda sounded resigned. That is exactly what she said you would say. Paranoia. Oh, Kinsley, I am going to pray for you. She hung up. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Belle was salting the earth by painting me as mentally unstable. She was inoculating the family against anything I might find. If I came forward with proof of fraud, they would dismiss it as the ramblings of a hysterical daughter who had snapped. My phone pinged again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the Starbucks on 5th and Main. 30 minutes. Wear a hat. I hesitated. It could be a trap, but my instincts told me otherwise. The message was too specific, too urgent. I grabbed my coat and slipped out the back door of the motel. The coffee shop was crowded with the lunchtime rush. I spotted a young woman in the back corner, nervously shredding a napkin. She looked to be about 25, wearing a blazer that was slightly too large for her. I approached the table. The woman jumped. She looked around the room before nodding. Sit down, please. I sat. Who are you? My name is Sarah, she whispered. I work at the downtown branch of Wells Fargo. I am a junior actuary. I saw the news about the funeral dispute, and I saw your name. I processed the paperwork. What paperwork? I asked, leaning in. The beneficiary change, Sarah said. The one that happened the day before your mother died. My heart skipped a beat. Go on. I didn't handle the signing, Sarah explained rapidly. My manager did, but I had to scan the documents into the system later that day. I have seen your mother's signature 100 times. She had a very specific way of signing. She had a slight tremor in her M. She always looped the D twice. Sarah looked around again, checking the door. The signature on that document was perfect, she said. It was smooth, confident. The pressure on the pen was heavy and even. Your mother had arthritis, Miss Roberts. She couldn't apply that kind of pressure if she tried. You are saying it was forged, I said. I am saying it was drawn, Sarah corrected. It looked like someone practiced it, but they missed the tremor. They made it too clean. It was a graphical match, but a biomechanical failure. Did you tell anyone? My manager, Sarah said. He told me to mind my own business. He said the client was in a hurry, but then... She paused, reaching into her bag. Then I saw the security log. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of a digital log. I shouldn't have this, she said. If they find out, I will go to jail for data theft, but I couldn't sleep. I unfolded the paper. It was a timestamp log of the bank's entry sensors. The woman who came in to sign those papers, Sarah said, tapping a line on the sheet. The cameras at the door have height recognition software. It is for security to help identify robbers. I looked at the data. Subject height 5 feet 8 inches. My mother was 5 feet 4 inches. She was wearing heels, I suggested, playing devil's advocate. Your mother walked with a cane the last time she came in, Sarah said. She never wore heels, and even in 6-inch stilettos, the gait would be different. I watched the video feed from the parking lot. The woman who got out of that car moved like a dancer. She had a long stride. She hopped up the curb. Sarah looked me in the eye. That wasn't your mother, Ms. Roberts. That was a performance. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means. Be careful, Sarah said, standing up to leave. My manager. He made a phone call right after I asked him about the signature. He called a number that wasn't in the directory. He looked scared. She hurried out of the shop. I sat there for a moment, the paper burning a hole in my hand. Twist number 3, it wasn't just a forged signature. It was a body double. They hired an actress. A woman who looked enough like Denise from a distance with a wig and big glasses to fool a camera, but who couldn't replicate the frailty of a dying woman's hand. I drove to a public library to use their computer. When I logged into the secure chat, there was a message waiting from Evelyn. Evelyn, we have a problem at the funeral home. Graham is trying to move the body. He claims he has a court order. Kinsley, I have proof of an imposter. The woman who signed the papers was 5 feet 8 inches. Mom was 5 feet 4 inches. It is physical proof, Evelyn. Evelyn. Good, keep it. Do not send it digitally yet. They are watching the data streams. I have already intervened. My lawyers filed a petition for preservation of evidence. We claimed that the body is material to a potential criminal investigation regarding the trust. The judge granted a 24-hour hold, but Graham is furious. I logged off. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID said Graham Kessler. I stared at the screen, the audacity of the man. I answered it, putting it on speaker. What do you want, Graham? Kinsley. His voice was different. The aggression was replaced by a weary paternal tone that made my skin crawl. We need to stop this. This fighting. It is what Denise would have hated most. You know what Denise would have hated? I asked. Being murdered. There was a long, heavy silence. You are upset, Graham said, ignoring the accusation. Belle told me about your confusion. Look, Kinsley, I want to make peace for your mother's sake. Come to the house tonight. Just you and me. No lawyers, no guards. Let's have a drink. Let's look at the photo albums. Let me explain why things happened the way they did. There are things here I think you should have. Her jewelry, her journals. I don't want Belle to take them. I want you to have them. It was a bait so obvious it was insulting. He was offering me the sentimental scraps to get me into a room where he could control the narrative, or perhaps silence me permanently. I will think about it, I said. Please, Graham said. 7 o'clock. I will leave the gate open. I hung up. I had no intention of going to that house alone, but the invitation meant one thing. Graham was desperate. The legal hold on the body had spooked him. He needed to neutralize me before the autopsy could happen. I drove back to the motel as the sun began to set. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with another approaching storm. When I reached my room, I stopped at the door. There was a package sitting on the welcome mat. It was a brown manila envelope, indistinguishable from 100 others, except for the fact that it had no postage, no return address, and my name was written on it in thick black marker. I looked up and down the outdoor corridor. The parking lot was empty. I picked up the package. It was light. I went inside, locked the door, and used a pen to slit the envelope open. I shook the contents out onto the bed. It was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, taken from a high angle, likely a telephoto lens. It showed me standing outside the door of this very motel room. The timestamp in the corner of the photo was from 2 hours ago. They had been watching me while I was talking to the lawyer. They knew exactly where I was sleeping. I turned the photo over. Written on the back in the same blocky black marker was a message. Do not dig graves. You might fall in one. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a warning about litigation. This was a physical threat. They were telling me that I was within their reach. I looked at the phone. 7 o'clock. Graham's invitation. Come home, he had said. I will leave the gate open. He wasn't inviting me to a reconciliation. He was inviting me to the site of my own burial. I grabbed my bag. I wasn't staying in this motel another second. I needed to move. I needed to find a place where their lenses couldn't see me, because tomorrow I wasn't just going to dig a grave. I was going to exhume the truth, and I was going to drag Graham Kessler into the light. Kicking and screaming, I drove through the wrought iron gates of the Kessler estate at 7 o'clock sharp. The house was a sprawling colonial revival mansion that looked beautiful from the street, but felt like a mausoleum the moment I stepped onto the driveway. Graham had framed this as a family reconciliation, but the two massive security guards standing by the front door told a different story. They were not there to welcome me. They were there to make sure I did not stray. Graham met me in the foyer. He was holding a tumbler of scotch, his smile tight and practiced. He told me I had 10 minutes. He said it was for my own emotional well-being, that he did not want me to be overwhelmed by the memories in my mother's private suite. It was a polite way of saying I was being supervised. I walked up the grand staircase, my hand trailing along the banister. I remembered sliding down this banister when I was 12, before Graham moved in, before the house became a museum of pretenses. I entered the master bedroom. It smelled of her perfume, lavender, and old paper. And for a moment, the grief hit me so hard I had to lean against the door frame. It felt as if she had just left the room to get a glass of water. But I was not here to cry, I was here to hunt. I moved to her vanity table. It was an antique piece, rosewood with brass inlays, where she used to sit for hours brushing her hair. I sat on the velvet stool, and a memory washed over me. I was 10 years old, watching her apply lipstick. She had told me that a woman's face is her armor, but her secrets are her weapons. I opened the center drawer. It was filled with her jewelry, the pieces Graham deemed too sentimental or too cheap to pawn. I ran my fingers over a string of pearls. That was when I noticed the screw heads on the drawer runner. They were shiny. The metal was bright, contrasting with the aged patina of the surrounding wood. Someone had removed this drawer recently and put it back. I pulled the drawer out as far as it would go. I felt along the bottom underneath the velvet lining. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. I glanced at the door. The guard was standing in the hallway, his back to me. I peeled back the corner of the velvet. Taped to the wood was a small flat square wrapped in clear cellophane. It was a micro SD card. Next to it was a scrap of paper torn from a grocery list with handwriting that made my heart stop. If you find this, Kinsley, it means I did not make it to tell you myself. I slipped the card and the note into my bra. I grabbed a silver hairbrush from the surface of the vanity to justify my presence, stood up, and walked out of the room. I have what I came for, I told the guard. I left the house without saying goodbye to Graham. I drove 3 blocks until I saw the black sedan waiting in the shadow of a weeping willow tree. I parked my car, climbed into the passenger seat of the sedan, and handed the memory card to Evelyn. She produced a laptop from her bag, inserted the card, and we sat in the dark silence of the suburb, waiting for the dead to speak. The file was an audio recording. The timestamp was dated 4 weeks ago. My mother's voice filled the car. It was shaky, breathless, as if she were recording it in a closet while hiding from someone. Kinsley, the recording began. If you are listening to this, then my worst fears have come true. I need you to listen carefully. I do not have much time. Graham is not just spending the money. He is laundering it. I found papers in his briefcase. He is forging my signature on loan documents for companies I have never heard of. There was a pause and the sound of a door creaking. My mother lowered her voice to a whisper. It is not just him. He is terrified. I heard him on the phone with a man named Miles. They talked about the consortium. That is the group your grandmother used to fight. They are back, Kinsley. They are using Graham to drain the estate dry. They threatened him. They said if I did not sign the release forms for the new trust structure, they would hurt you. I felt a cold hand grip my heart. She stayed. She stayed in that house with that monster because she thought she was protecting me. I cannot go to the police. The recording continued. Graham has the local precinct in his pocket, but I have kept a record. I tracked every paper he put in front of me. I made copies. I hid them in the way you taught me when you were in college. She took a ragged breath. Find the harbor ledger, Kinsley. You know what that means. You know how to read it. It is all there. The recording ended with a click. Evelyn stared at the dashboard. The Harbor Ledger. Does that mean anything to you? It is not a book, I said, my voice thick with tears. It is a methodology. When I was studying for my certified public accountant exam, I taught Mom a system of double-entry bookkeeping called the Harbor Method. It is a way of hiding a secondary set of numbers inside a primary set using decimal points as codes. If an entry ends in 33, it is real. If it ends in 66, it is a fabrication. She is telling me that the fake books Graham is keeping are actually the key. She encoded the truth inside his lies. She was brilliant, Evelyn whispered. She played the fool to survive. She did more than that, I said, realizing the implication. She said she hid copies. That means there is a physical stash somewhere. But the Harbor Ledger clue leads to something else. The trust. The one you showed me in the chapel. The one that activates upon her death. Mom mentioned a new trust structure in the recording. She said they wanted her to sign release forms. That means she refused. Which means the original terms stand, Evelyn said. No, I corrected. It means the emergency terms stand. The terms she wrote with Caleb Rohr. I grabbed the laptop and pulled up the scanned copy of the trust document Evelyn had given me earlier. I scrolled to the bottom past the legal jargon to the section on the appointment of the executive. Look at this, I said, pointing to Clause 7b. In the event of my death, if the primary beneficiary is under suspicion of malfeasance, the control of the assets shall transfer immediately to a special administrator. That is standard language, Evelyn said. Read the definition of the special administrator, I urged. Evelyn adjusted her glasses and read aloud. The special administrator must be a blood relative, possessing a state-certified license in forensic accounting with a minimum of 10 years of field experience and no prior criminal record. Evelyn stopped reading. She looked at me. There is only one person in the world who fits that description, she said. Me, I said. She did not name me because if she named me, Graham would have seen it and forced her to change it. She described me. She set a qualification standard that only I could meet. She locked Graham out by making the key my resume. She baited him, Evelyn said, a dawn of realization breaking over her face. She let Graham think he was in charge all, while she was building a legal fortress around the money that he could not breach without you. And that is why they killed her. They realized the trust was ironclad, I said, the truth settling on me like a shroud. They realized that as long as she was alive and refusing to sign the new structure, they were stuck. So, they killed her, hoping to rush the probate process and bury the will before anyone noticed the specific qualifications for the administrator. Suddenly, the laptop chimed. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It was from the encrypted server Evelyn's team had set up. Incoming message recovered. Email fragment. Source: Caleb Rohr's server. Cipher found something, Evelyn said, clicking on the notification. The email opened. The subject line was, "If you are reading this, I am dead." The sender was Caleb Rohr. The recipient was Kinsley Roberts. The timestamp was yesterday, 5 minutes before the fire alarm was pulled at his building. I leaned in, reading the words of a man who knew he was about to die. Dear Kinsley, I am sending this on a time delay because I hear footsteps in the hallway. They know I have the USB drive. They know about the ledger. I need you to know the medical truth. I received the preliminary toxicology screen from a contact at the lab before Graham had it suppressed. It was not just a heart condition. The screen showed high levels of potassium chloride. It mimics cardiac arrest. It is undetectable after a certain period, which is why they are rushing the cremation. It was not an accident. It was an injection. Graham is not the top of the food chain. He is afraid of a man named Miles Arden. Miles works for the one entity your grandmother never managed to destroy. If I do not make it out of this building, take this information to the federal prosecutor. Do not go to the local police. Run Kinsley and do not stop until you have brought them down. The email ended there. I sat back in the seat, the silence of the car deafening. Potassium chloride, an execution drug. They had injected my mother with the same substance used on death row inmates. They murdered her, I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm of the eye of a storm, and they murdered Caleb to cover it up. Evelyn closed the laptop with a snap. Her face was set in stone. We have the motive. We have the legal standing. And now we have the name of the man holding the leash. Miles Arden, I said. Who is he? He was a junior analyst in my company 20 years ago. Evelyn said, her voice dripping with disdain. I fired him for embezzlement. I thought he was a petty thief. I did not realize he had ambition. He has my mother's blood on his hands. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Harborgate badge I had worn earlier that day. I looked at it, then tossed it onto the dashboard. I am done being an auditor. Tomorrow, when I walk into that courtroom, I am not going to just audit their books. I am going to foreclose on their lives. Evelyn started the engine. The car purred to life. Graham has called for a family meeting tonight. He thinks he can buy you off. You will go. You will sit in that house, and you will look him in the eye while you record every word he says, because tonight, the dead are coming to dinner. No, I said, looking out the window at the dark outline of the city. Tomorrow isn't a funeral, it is a reckoning. The courtroom was a study in contrasts. On the left side of the aisle sat Graham Kessler and his legal team, a phalanx of expensive suits and confident smiles. They looked like they were attending a board meeting where the outcome had already been decided in their favor. On the right side sat my legal counsel, a shark named Eleanor Vance, whom Evelyn had retained, and me. The hearing was technically about the injunction to stop the cremation, but we all knew it was the opening salvo of a murder trial. Graham's lead attorney stood up. Your Honor, he boomed, gesturing toward me with a theatrical sweep of his hand. This injunction is baseless. It is a harassment tactic deployed by a disgruntled daughter who was written out of the will. Ms. Roberts is trying to desecrate the remains of her mother by demanding invasive procedures that Denise Marlowe specifically requested to avoid. We have the cremation order signed by the husband. The law is clear. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked at our table. Ms. Vance, why should this court interfere with the next of kin's rights? Eleanor stood up. She did not boom. She sliced. Because, Your Honor, Eleanor said, holding up a sworn affidavit. The next of kin paid a premium to destroy the evidence before a standard review could take place. She walked to the bench and handed the paper to the bailiff. We have a sworn statement from Mr. Abernathy, the director of the funeral home holding the body, where he admits that Graham Kessler paid him $5,000 in cash, delivered in a brown envelope, to bypass the state-mandated 48-hour waiting period for cremation. Mr. Kessler cited emotional distress as the reason, but we believe the reason was forensic evasion. The courtroom murmured. Graham went rigid in his chair, whispering furiously to his lawyer, who was suddenly looking much less confident. Bribery is a serious accusation, the judge said, reading the document. It is not an accusation when the recipient confesses, Eleanor said. Mr. Abernathy is currently cooperating with the district attorney in exchange for leniency. He confirmed that the rush order did not come from grief. It came from a deadline. The judge looked up, her eyes hard. Motion granted. The body of Denise Marlowe is now a ward of the court. It will be transferred immediately to the state medical examiner for a full independent autopsy. Any attempt to interfere will be met with a contempt charge and immediate incarceration. Graham's face turned a shade of gray that matched the courtroom walls. Step 1 was complete. We had the body. During the recess, I retreated to a small conference room reserved for our team. Agent Miller, the contact Evelyn had vetted, was waiting for me. He had a grim look on his face that told me the day was about to get heavier. We got the analysis back on the forgery, Miller said, skipping the pleasantries. He placed a high-resolution scan of the beneficiary change form on the table. We already know the signature is fake, I said, thinking of Sarah, the actuary. Sarah from the bank confirmed the height difference. It is not just the biometrics, Miller said. It is the ink. He pulled out a second photo. Do you recognize this? Exactly, Miller said. The ink used to sign your mother's forged beneficiary form is a custom iron gall blend that Caleb Rohr mixed himself. He was a hobbyist. The chemical signature is unique. It contains trace amounts of a specific cobalt blue dye he ordered from Germany. I stared at the document. So the forger used Caleb's pen, which means they broke in, stole his equipment to give the forgery an air of authenticity, and then incinerated the room to hide the theft. It ties the murder of my mother to the arson. It is the same hand, I whispered. And we have a visual on that hand, Miller said. He opened his laptop. We'll canvass the neighborhood around your mother's house. Graham disabled the security cameras on the estate itself, but he forgot about the neighbors. Miller played a video file. It was grainy, black and white footage from a camera across the street. The timestamp was 2 o'clock in the morning on the night my mother died. A car pulled up to the curb. A figure got out. They were wearing dark clothes, but the build was slender. They walked up the driveway, disappearing into the shadows of the porch. 30 minutes later, the figure returned, carrying a thick leather expansion bag. That is my mother's case file, I said, recognizing the shape. She kept her evidence in a leather accordion folder. She called it her insurance policy. Watch the walk, Miller said. I watched. The figure walked with a distinct, confident stride. It was not the walk of a thief sneaking in. It was the walk of someone who had a key, someone who felt entitled to be there. The figure stopped under a street lamp for a split second to adjust the bag. The light hit their face. It was blurry, but I saw the outline of a jaw, the sweep of hair. It is not Graham, I said. No, it is too small to be Graham. It looks like a woman. A knock on the door interrupted us. It was a bailiff. Ems Roberts, someone is asking to speak with you. She says it is urgent. Belle Kessler. I looked at Miller. He nodded once. Go. But keep your recording app running. I found Belle in the ladies' room on the second floor. She was standing by the sink staring at her reflection. She looked wrecked. Her perfect hair was fraying at the edges, and her eyes were rimmed with red. She did not look like the arrogant woman who had mocked me in the lobby a few days ago. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and realized too late that it was a priceless artifact. You look tired, Belle, I said, leaning against the door to block the exit. She jumped, spinning around. Kinsley, what do you want? I am here on break. Did Graham send you to offer me another settlement? Maybe 300,000 this time. No, Belle said, her voice shaking. He doesn't know I am here. He is losing it, Kinsley. He is screaming at the lawyers. He is losing control. He is losing control, I said. That tends to happen when you get caught. Belle walked toward me, her hands twisting together. I need you to know something. I need you to believe me. I didn't know, she cried out, the sound echoing off the tile walls. I swear to God, Kinsley, I didn't know they were going to kill her. The confession hung in the air. What did you think they were doing, Belle? Just robbing her. Yes! Graham said it was just a restructuring. He said Denise was being difficult about the trust, and that she was going to cut us all off. He said we just needed to move the assets before she filed for divorce. He said Miles had a plan to make her sign. Miles, I said. Miles Arden? She flinched at the name. He came to the house. He brought the papers. I thought they were just going to pressure her. Maybe blackmail her. I didn't know about the medicine. I didn't know about the stairs. You knew enough to lie to the police, I said. You knew enough to tell everyone I was crazy. I was scared, Belle sobbed. Graham told me that if I didn't stick to the story, Miles would come for me next. He said I was an accessory. He said I would go to jail for 20 years. I looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. You are an accessory, Belle, but you don't have to be a convict. You can be a witness. Who was the woman in the video? The one who came to the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. Belle went pale. You have video. We have everything. We know someone came in. Was it you? No, Belle whispered. It was the closer. That is what Miles calls her. The woman he sends when signatures need to be forced. I never met her. Graham just called her the architect. I let that sink in. A professional. A hit woman with a notary stamp. Go back out there, I told her. Sit next to your father, and when the time comes, you better pray you are standing on the right side of the room. I returned to the courtroom just as the session resumed. Your Honor, Eleanor Vance said, standing up again. Based on new evidence regarding the financial complexity of this case, we are filing an emergency motion for theft of estate by deception. We are asking the court to compel Mr. Kessler to surrender all financial records, including those of the shell entities, Blue Hollow Freight and Meridian Logistics, immediately.
Objection!
Graham's lawyer shouted.
This is a fishing expedition!
It is not fishing when you can see the shark circling, Eleanor retorted. We have provided the court with a preliminary audit showing structured wire transfers that mirror money laundering patterns. The judge ruled. The court finds the evidence compelling. Mr. Kessler, you have 24 hours to produce the records. If a single email is deleted, I will hold you in contempt. Graham slumped in his chair. The financial wall had breached, but the final blow came an hour later. The court had adjourned for the day, but the judge called both parties into her chambers. She held a faxed report in her hand. It was the preliminary summary from the medical examiner. I have the preliminary findings from Dr. Aris, the judge said, her voice devoid of emotion. He fast-tracked the toxicology and the physical trauma assessment per my order. She placed the paper on the desk. The cause of death was not the fall. The judge read, the deceased suffered a massive cardiac event induced by a toxic level of digoxin and potassium chloride. The physical trauma, the broken neck, and the bruising shows a distinct lack of vital reaction. She looked over her glasses at Graham. That means, Mr. Kessler, that your wife was already dead when she fell down the stairs. Her heart had stopped beating. Dead bodies do not bruise like living ones. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hovering at the top of its arc. The medical examiner has ruled the manner of death as homicide, the judge concluded. I am revoking your bail on the defamation suit, Mr. Kessler, and I am issuing a bench warrant for your arrest pending formal charges from the district attorney. Graham stood up, knocking his chair over.
This is a mistake! She had a weak heart!
She slipped. She didn't slip, Graham? I said, my voice quiet and steady. You pushed her, but you forgot to check if she was still breathing first. 2 bailiffs moved in. Graham Kessler, the man who thought he could buy the world, was handcuffed in a judge's chambers. As they led him away, he turned to look at me. His eyes were wild, filled with hate. You think you won? He hissed. You think this is over? Miles will burn it all down. He will burn you down. Let him try, I said. The door closed. The war wasn't over. Graham was just a pawn. But the Queen, Evelyn H. Halstead, was getting ready to clear the board. I walked out of the courthouse and into the evening sun. The news vans were waiting, their microphones thrust in my face. Emma's Roberts, is it true? Was your mother murdered? I looked directly into the camera lens, knowing that somewhere Miles Arden was watching. My mother was not just murdered, I said clearly. She was erased. But ink is permanent, and we are just starting to read the fine print. In the hallway, Evelyn was waiting. She looked older than I had ever seen her. The steel facade had cracked, revealing the grandmother underneath. He confessed. She asked. He gave up Miles, I said. The police are issuing an all-points bulletin for Miles Arden right now. They have his alias, his vehicle, everything. Evelyn nodded, but she didn't look relieved. She looked sorrowful. There is something I need to tell you, she said, about why I left. I told you it was to protect the company. That is what I told myself, but it was Denise who made the call. She reached out and touched my arm. 5 years ago, when the threats from Miles started, I wanted to fight. But Denise came to me. She said, Mother, if you fight him, he will kill Kinsley. He will target the grandchild to get to the grandmother. She begged me to disappear. She said it was the only way to take the target off your back. I lived with the grief of my own death every single day so that you could walk around safely. Mom did that, I whispered. She sacrificed her relationship with her mother to save her daughter. The anger I had felt toward my mother for being weak, for staying with Graham, evaporated. She hadn't been weak. She had been a human shield. She protected me until the last second, I whispered. She was the strongest of us all, Evelyn said, tears shining in her eyes. A commotion at the front of the station drew our attention. Officers were leading Graham out in handcuffs. The press had gathered on the steps of the courthouse next door. Sensing the climax of the drama, I walked out onto the portico. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and cold. Graham was being shoved into the back of a squad car. He looked broken, a man whose life had been dismantled in 48 hours. But as the officer pushed his head down to protect it from the door frame, Graham caught sight of me standing on the steps. He stopped. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't look at the police. He looked straight at me. And then he smiled. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It was a smile of someone who knows a joke that no one else has heard. "Kinsley?" he shouted, his voice raspy. The police tried to shove him in, but he resisted, planting his feet. "You think you won?" he yelled. "But you don't even know who you are fighting for." He jerked his head toward the black sedan where Evelyn was waiting in the shadows. "You think that is Evelyn H. Halstead? Ask her about the scar. Ask her why she never takes off the gloves. You think the dead come back? No. You are just a pawn in a game between two devils." He jerked his head toward the black sedan, where Evelyn was waiting in the shadows. "You think that is Evelyn H. Halstead? Ask her about the scar. Ask her why she never takes off the gloves. You think the dead come back? No. You are just a pawn in a game between two devils. Get him inside," the sergeant ordered. Graham was slammed into the car, the door shut. But through the window, he mouthed one last sentence to me. "She is not who she says she is." The car drove away, sirens wailing. I stood on the steps, the adrenaline draining out of me, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. I turned to look at the black sedan. The window was tinted, but I could see the silhouette of the woman inside. My grandmother, the billionaire, the savior. Graham was a liar. He was a murderer. He would say anything to hurt me. But as I walked toward the car, my mind flashed back to the moment in the chapel, the way she walked, the way she spoke. And then I remembered a memory from my childhood, my real grandmother sitting in the garden. She had a distinct jagged scar running down the back of her left hand, a souvenir from a childhood accident with a glass bottle. The woman in the car, Evelyn, had been wearing leather gloves since the moment she stepped out of the vehicle at the funeral. I had never seen her hands. I stopped 10 feet from the car. The window lowered. She smiled at me. It was a warm, triumphant smile. "Get in, Kinsley," she said. "We have work to do. Miles is still out there." I looked at her gloved hands resting on the steering wheel. "Coming," I said. But as I reached for the door handle, I realized that the mystery of my mother's death might have been solved, but the mystery of my own survival was just beginning. Graham's question hung in the air like smoke. I opened the door and got in, but this time I didn't lock it. I was walking away from the chapel's symbol of grief and toward my new, terrifying destiny. I was the administrator, I was the auditor, and the account finally was balanced.